Hello and welcome to a new episode of Remote Pair Programming. This is the third episode with Stefan. We're going to continue the pull request explorer with iOS, and Stefan will say more about what we want to do today. So hi.
Hi. So today I don't have a very strict plan, but let's keep going. I want to do a bit of refactoring and then add some features. And we can figure that out as we go. One thing I would also like to look differently is not spend so much time in tutorial mode, but rather just move at a faster pace, and then you can course correct me and let me know when I need to explain something.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. So let's recap where we were last time. We have this application that uses the GitHub GraphQL API to fetch the repositories I have access to.
Mm-hmm.
It allows me to start them and unstart them. And also, if I open one, I can see a list of pull requests. Now, the visuals are clearly what they are not there yet. And also there's some junk coming in here in the terminal, and also there's some missing stuff we need to add. So essentially I want to head up towards introducing Rx because it's gonna make next steps easier. But before I go there, I do want to tidy it up a bit. For example, all this junk in the terminal, I want to fix it. So I have a bunch of print statements somewhere. I think this is one of them. So let me fix that. And then there was a warning. So I think this cell here is having the wrong class. And actually, I think last time we did not create a special class for this. Cool, now I don't have junk. Done. Cool, so let's make a plan. We have a list of things we need to do here from last time. Let's ignore it for now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna move this to the bottom. And I want to introduce Rx here. I want to add a title to the pull request screen. And I want to add infinite scrolling, which is where it's gonna get like really, really funky.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not high pride, but I will do it just to rest after we've done this one. So before we go there, do you think it's good to say a few words about what Rx is and how it works?
I don't know what that is, so it's gonna be useful.
Awesome. So it's something called reactive extensions. And fundamentally, it's a way to do things that's not necessarily a framework, but you have a bunch of framework in different languages. You actually have a family of frameworks, but this is the one I like. So it's this one.
ReactiveX.
Yeah, you have an Rx framework for Ruby, for .NET, for Java, for Swift, for Clojure, for Scala, for a bunch of things. I guess where it's like really cool, it's the ones here. Like Rx Java is definitely big on Android. This one is big in JavaScript. Angular uses it. Don't know about .NET, but I can imagine that there's a bunch of it, and it's really nice in Swift. A development that Apple has done recently is they have introduced something called Combine, which is like very, very forward thinking from Apple, but it's essentially Rx. So it's the same idea. If you ever like start doing iOS, Combine is essentially Rx.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether we should be using Rx or Combine is a different question, but I'm not like iOS 13 compliant yet, so I'm using Rx. I might change in the future. Cool. So, what is it about? Simplifying it a lot, it gives you a type called observable, and it's a container type. So it's say an observable of int or an observable string, and it represents a stream of values that can change over time. And the protocol is that you get changes with this next event. So you can get an event next with a new value. And then finally, you either get an error event that contains an error or a completed event. So that's the protocol. You get like a bunch of nexts, and then you get either an error or a completed event. Not every observable needs to be completed, and not every observable needs to emit new values. There are use cases for either, really. But we can model a lot of things with that idea. So, for example, we can model a network code that way. A network code would be, it waits for a while and then emits the result from the network code and then emits completed. Or alternatively, it just emits an error.
Yeah.
You can model, say, like a list of things. For example, you can model this list here as a observable of pull requests. No, sorry, that's repositories. And initially it would emit the list it fetched from the network, and then every time I change something, for example, press the star here, it would re-emit the list again, but with the value changed.
So only with the value changed, or the whole list?
It would re-emit the whole list.
Okay.
But you re-render the whole thing, and then you're fine. You can model a lot of things this way. So why do you do it? You get two things. One of them is you get a subscription capability. So some code can give you an observable for your network request, and you can subscribe to it. And subscribing to it means I want to be notified about changes. And this would allow you to decouple business logic from UI very well.
Yeah, of course. So it's kind of an event in a way.
Yeah. Another reason you want to use it is because you get a bunch of combinators. So you can map an observable to a different observable, or you can even do fancier stuff. For example, you can make a single network request, and this if you do not have GraphQL, to say fetch the list of repositories I have access to. So let's say this returns me an observable from repositories. Makes a single REST request, and then I get like some JSON. And then I can flat map this to essentially a list of new requests, each of them an observable. That would make a request for each repository to get the pull requests, if it makes sense. So one for each repository. And then finally I can, depending on how you want to go with it, reduce the whole thing to say like a hash that maps a repository to an array of pull requests. So I start with a single call. As soon as that completes, I fire multiple calls, one for each pull request, and then I combine the result together.
Okay.
And every time there's an error, that error is going to get traced down to the bottom. So this like final observable is going to emit an error instead, and then I can deal with the error. So don't worry if you don't get the detail right now, you're going to see it in action. But fundamentally, it's very simple to promise from the JavaScript world. So, like a promise is something that eventually completes or errors out. And if it completes, it gives you a result, and you can map it additionally to some other promises or just transform them.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is that an observable can emit many times, a promise can emit only once.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like, observables are the big brothers of promises. Cool, so that's about it.
Okay, so let's see it in action.
Yeah, so the first thing I want to do is wrap this one behind an observable.
Yeah.
And yeah, sure, why not? Let's start here. Now, actually, we have a bug here that we did not discuss last time, but I'm creating a watch here that would keep re-emitting results. But when I come here, this watch gets called, and then when I go back, it doesn't get deallocated. So this would potentially memory leak. If I keep doing this eventually, my memory would keep growing. Let's actually see if we can demonstrate this. So here's where you see the memory. I'm not sure you can see it.
Yeah, it's 60, 62, 63, 63 again, 64. So it kind of increases with maybe 500 kilos per request.
Yeah, there's definitely a memory leak here because A, I need to deallocate it, B, I'm probably capturing self and it's creating a cycle. But there might be multiple reasons for a memory leak, but fundamentally there is a memory leak here. And I'm not going to solve it now. I'm just going to wrap it in an observable and then solve it.
Okay.
So when it comes to upload, there's a library somewhere in GitHub that has extensions and essentially already does this for me. But I kind of don't care for this library. I'm just gonna see what they've done here and essentially copy paste it and tweak it a bit. The reason is I'm familiar with that library and I don't like it that much. There are a bunch of things I would like to do differently, and it's not that much code. So let's just create a file. And then there's a watch here. So let's just copy paste that for now and see what happens. Yeah, it's also not sufficiently up to date. So we need to fix that as well. So the problem here is that historically Apple used to like throw in two things here. Now it just does one code result. I think we covered that one, but it's either a success or a failure. I need to switch over it here. Let's handle those cases. So, if there's an error, I need to go on error. If there's data, go next. Just comment this for a second. Okay, I'm missing something here. So let's figure this error out.
It's another type of result, right?
Yeah. So it's GraphQL. Yeah, right. I need to call something here, I guess. Yeah, that's a bit annoying. But I think that's not the right code, but at least it should compile. Cool, so yeah, the problem is that this is optional. So let's call this result set. And this can be empty. So the problem is this here can be new, but I'm expecting a not new result. Now, normally this tends to be an error somewhere else, so I'm just gonna In order to save time, I'm just gonna like return error here. So the way we do it is we say if let result set equals result set. No, actually, let's switch it. Switch result set. If it's some data, no, so result set of data. If it's some data, then I want to emit on next. And if it's an error, so if it's none, I want to like emit on error. And let's just go with an empty, or rather, it's a bit confusing, but I'm gonna take it. So anyway, this should both compile and work. Sweet. So essentially, it creates an observable, and this is the block that creates an observable. And here you can emit a bunch of events. Now in here, I'm gonna call watch. And whenever it emits a result, I'm gonna pass the result next to the observable or pass the error next to the observable.
Mm-hmm.
Finally,
Okay.
this for housekeeping. So each observable create call should return a disposable, and this disposable gets called when you're not using it any longer. So here we're canceling this watcher that we're using here. So this is the code we have from Apollo, and here we are wrapping it in observable. And now you can see here that we have a method that takes a query and returns an observable with that query response time. Does it make sense so far?
Yeah, for me it makes sense.
Cool. The return here is not necessary, and this code looks a bit tight to me, but I'm not gonna change anything.
Yeah, let's just make it work, and then
yeah,
if you can refactor stuff.
Sweet. So here we can replace it with now that's the big mystery. How do we this is what I've been missing. Let's put it on top. So this essentially like throws in a method or a property on a class that I don't own, but that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can watch.
And in this way you can access it.
Yeah, I can watch this query, and then that's return observable, and here I can subscribe to it. And there's a nicer way to do it, but let's go for the not so nice way for now. Let me just write this down.
Well, editors try to help you too much sometimes.
Far too much. Cool, now we should be making two query, and I want to make sure that I'm seeing this print. And that's when I come here, and yeah, I'm seeing the print. Cool. So I can just take this stuff here and essentially put it here.
Okay.
Now we're currently not handling the error, but we did not handle it very well last time either. So yeah, I used to call this response. Let's call it response. No, actually, you know what? Just this. And this guy can go on a single line. So yeah, Let's test it.
Something is apparently wrong, right?
Yeah, I think we used to go like reload data here somewhere, and I just like remove that.
Yeah, reload data 16.
Yeah, this guy. Oops, I messed it up. Anyway, sorry. I was hoping I can use my undo history here, but I mistyped, but it's fine. Can change it quickly enough. Just take the note, and then I go. That should be enough. Okay, fine. That should be enough. There we go.
So reload data, what is it doing in table view?
Essentially, this table view has a data source. Here's the implementation, and data source tells me how many cells it has and what's the value of each cell. When it gets rendered initially, those folks get called, and initially it has an empty pull request array. Because remember, we're firing a network call here, but it doesn't return immediately. So those things will get printed in reverse order. Because this one doesn't do anything immediately. It just subscribes. And then when the network request finishes, then this block is going to get called. So yeah, reverse order. And then I'm changing this array, but it has already been used here. So I need to somehow tell iOS that no, I have new data, you need to re-render it.
So that's why the reload data.
Yeah, that's why I need to do reload data, and that's why we didn't see anything last time.
Okay.
The call happened, but the UI did not update. And by the way, there are nicer ways to do this, but it's more involved, and we can save that for another time.
Okay.
But the point is I wanted to have this abstraction. Now, I want to hunt down the memory leak. And the way I'm going to do it, I should have a cooler way to do it that I'm going to show you later, is print here whenever this gets deallocated. So fundamentally in Swift, you have reference counting, but no mark and sweep, which means if you have a cycle, it's your problem, not the runtime's problem. It's much better in Java, but sadly not in Swift. So when I come here and then go back, this guy here doesn't get printed. And it's because of this block here. Now, it's not really evident why, but let me comment it out and show you that without it, this is going to get printed. There we go. And the reason is that there's a cycle here. There's a strong cycle. So there's an alive subscription here that's referring to the block here. And then finally, the block here is referring to self. So this guy here doesn't get deallocated, and it's a problem. Let me just solve it. So the very first thing I need to do here is actually let me trace it a bit differently. So essentially, you create a subscription, and then that subscription can get disposed eventually. I'm going to add some debugging here to print that subscription gets disposed. So this is not going to get called right now, just because nobody's disposing it. But the way you are supposed to do this is you can either dispose it manually, like this, or you can add it to a dispose bag. So there's a method here called view will disappear, and let's dispose it here for now.
So there's a type disposable, I guess, that is a super type of.
Yeah, there's a type disposable. Essentially, so far up here we have a observable, and whenever you call subscribe, you call it on observable, and it returns disposable. Cool. So I don't think this would solve my problem, but let me demonstrate it. Or actually, it might solve my problem. It did. But it's very annoying to keep track of your subscriptions, and you have to do it explicitly. So normally what you do is you create something called a dispose bag, and whenever it gets disposed, the subscription gets disposed as well. So
okay, so you chain it.
Yeah, I can just add it to the dispose bag.
So it knows when to dispose it, or it disposes the bag whenever.
So whenever the bag is a bag, you put stuff into it, and whenever it gets disposed, all the subscriptions get disposed.
So it's a kind of a very primitive garbage collector. That's what I see, how I see it.
Yeah, a bit. So let me just try to explain that. So essentially, normally on a screen you create many subscriptions, but they won't get automatically disposed, and you do want them to get automatically disposed at some point. So the way you do it is collect all of them in a dispose bag, and then you dispose that bag when you're ready to dispose it, when, say, you're no longer on the screen. And whenever this controller gets deallocated, it will deallocate this dispose bag, and then when that gets deallocated, it's going to dispose this subscription here.
Yeah. So it sounds like garbage collection.
Yeah, kind of like part
but
of your
similar.
Problem. Yeah,
very simple.
Yeah, part of your problem is that you don't have mark and sweep here, and another part of your problem is that you need to be explicit about disposal. Like even in Java, you need to do that.
Yeah.
Because you need to tell your program when it should stop listening to subscriptions.
Yeah, of course. And that's because of a sync, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And here I'm saying whenever this gets disposed, dispose this as well, and it would in turn dispose this. But what you'll see here is that it's probably not going to work. And the reason is that there's a strong cycle here. This block here refers to the controller. The controller refers to the dispose bag, and the dispose bag refers to this subscription here. So that's very typical in Swift, and the way you solve it is you create a weak self here. So that's like just typical Swift stuff. So the self that gets captured here is no longer a strong cycle, sorry, a strong reference. It's a weak reference, but now it's an optional repository view controller. And then what you need to do here is this. It's a bit weird, but you're very used to this as an iOS developer. People call it the weak self dance, the weak strong dance. And now you see that like everything works. Cool. So I can kill this guy. I can kill this guy. And apart from this nonsense, which is pretty typical anyway, that's the standard pattern in iOS and RX. You need to have a dispose bag. When you have multiple disposables, you put them in here. And then finally, you make sure that you don't have cycles. This code here has the same problem. So if I was doing it properly, I would need to do weak self here as well. But let's essentially repeat the same exercise. And let's do it in one quick go this time.
Okay.
So why are we failing? Expose this. Strictly speaking, not necessary because this is my root controller and I cannot go beyond it, but you know, let's just be hygienic. Cool. And there we go. Now we've introduced RX. Let's see if this guy here still works. He does. Amazing.
Apparently.
I think this is a good time to commit.
Yeah, we did a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Let's see what we did. And this is fine. This is fine, and this is fine. If I was a bit more pedantic, I would tidy up my uploads, but I don't care about it now.
Upload what?
Imports, sorry. Cool. Actually, so there are 3 more things we can do, and I'm gonna give you a choice here. So we can use RX for the mutation because we have a mutation and we're not doing RX. We can go for infinite scrolling.
I think that's already there.
Yeah, and we can go for a better data source. And the reason is that, like, as I mentioned, like this guy here and this stuff here is a bit messy and it can be better.
So let's go on with RX and then just put it in
disorder. What about disorder?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. And then I would like to take a break here, so let's have the simple one. Cool, fine. Mutation. So here's my mutation. Yeah, the problem here though is that I'm not doing anything useful with the result of this mutation. If I want to do something when it is completed, or if I want to show the error, it might be worth wrapping it up, but right now it really isn't. So I think I misleaded you here. I think this one is fake.
Okay.
So let's go for the data source then. We are gonna use library here. I've already added it, and now you're gonna have the privilege of watching me really struggle with it. Because it's weirdly implemented. So essentially, it's gonna show you the first interesting moment here, which is, it's just gonna remove a lot of code, essentially. Let me see if I can do it the other way around. I think we should be fine here, actually. It should not be that much magic. The only interesting thing is, do I need a driver or do I need an observable? So I'm just gonna butcher this code a bit. Let's create my repositories, and then I think we need to do this repositories bind. Let's see, this should be an observable. Oh yeah, the have bind. Then I need to bind table view, Rx. Then here I should have a signature that takes a cell identifier, and let's just write it down and see what happens. So I'm taking this one from here, and then it should take a block that configures the cell. Index model cell in something. Let's see if this compiles. That's the struggling part. So I'm not sure why this example does not work in my... Actually, I do know why. It's the case of the wrongly placed parentheses.
Yeah, I had to.
Yeah, it's gonna be a mystery here.
That's a weird error.
Yeah. Welcome to Xcode. So am I missing something? Occasionally, when you have too many things going on in Xcode, it gets weird. I guess what I'm trying to say is that normally when you have an error somewhere else, you get a really weird error that's obfuscating your actual error.
Okay. Yeah, well, that happens in many languages, I guess.
Yeah, but I'm not sure what we're doing wrong here. Oh, of course I know what we're doing wrong. So the problem is that I need to actually have an array here. So let's comment this guy out. So if you look at repositories, it's an observable from this type here. And this type here is essentially representing the GraphQL response, which would be like this class here. It's going to have a data, that data is going to have some stuff. But fundamentally, the problem is that I need an array of something. So let's map this. Right now, this is a raw GraphQL response, and let me map it to repositories.map. So this maps the observable. It takes whatever value you have in the observable, and you map it to whatever you want to map it. And it's the code we have here, actually, pretty much. So now this should be an observable of an array of something.
I think you need to delete 17, right?
I need to delete 17. Yeah. Let's put it back here. And then this one here is a warning, but now this one should work.
Yeah.
Needs to be repo. And now it compiles. Cool. So yeah, errors in Xcode. Amazing. Let's not have a stupid name here. And now we actually have this nice thing where we have an array of an object, and this code here does not care about this network request. And what I'm going for is that we can put this in a separate file. But yeah, anyway, so here we need to do essentially this configuration here, which is this bind method. I prepared 2 screencasts in advance that takes a repository fragment. So all I need to do here is do cell.bind Well, not really. I need to cast it as a repository cell.
Yeah.
And then bind it to the repository fragment, which should be in modal. Let's add it to dispose bag and Bob's your uncle. This should work. If I run it right now, I'm not really sure whether it's this code here or this code here. So let's remove this code. Let's remove the UI table view delegate. And let's remove this.
I like when we're removing code.
It's the best. Yeah, I need to remove the data source, not the delegate. And I think this should be fine. It compiles.
Fatal error.
And it crashes.
Converting from optional repositories to UI table view data source. So it's a thing with binding, or?
Who knows? Let's trace it. It's a mystery. The UI table view source. Why though? Yeah, I'm struggling with that one. I'm not really sure what the runtime wants to tell me. Oh yeah, sorry, I know. Of course, there is somewhere else, as always. And the data source in this storyboard here is configured to a class that's no longer a data source.
Oh yeah, what we did in the first episode. Yeah.
Yeah, a long time ago. So this should fundamentally solve the problem. Let's see. And Bob's your uncle. Now we got this warning here, and to be perfectly honest with you, I actually think I know why it's here. Let me see if I can solve it. But the solution is not going to make any sense, so be prepared. Can I do drive maybe? Oh, bind should be fine.
Value has no.
It's a long story. Actually, you know what? Let me try a simpler thing. So essentially, another thing that RX lets you do is figure out how you want to do the threading. So far, this network query here should be happening on the background thread, and then this should get invoked in the main thread.
So and that's why you told him subscribe on main scheduler, because that's...
Yeah, I think this might fix it, but I'm not sure.
So now you put also the network call on the main thread?
No, the network call is still in the background.
Okay.
But let me try one more thing. That's the wrong place to put it. Yeah, I don't know. Do you want to debug this, or do you not care about it?
It's a warning. I think you need to be taken care of, but not necessarily immediately. I wouldn't be that strict on it now.
Yeah, right. You have a bunch of hypotheses, but they're all a bit boring. And this subscribe does not make a change here. Let me try one more thing. try one more thing. This guy from here to here. And there we go. That was the problem. So this guy gets called before the view hierarchy setup. This one gets called after.
So it's a cycle that, and then it was too early, right?
Yeah, I was calling it too early. And by the way, I need to go super here. Nobody tells you that, you just know it. It's somewhere in the documentation. It's also a mystery what can break, but that's a different story. Cool. So yeah, that's essentially it. And now, to be fair, you might not agree with me here, but I like to be extra succinct, so I will do this as well, which is use the anonymous arguments.
Okay. So those are just the parameters that you have, right?
Yeah, you don't need to name them. And the reason I don't care about that is because you can see. I mean, fundamentally, eventually, you are familiar with this data source here. So the only thing you care here about is that you're calling this bind method, and it's fine.
So number one is what?
Number one is the model, and number two is the cell.
Okay.
Number 0 is the index. And you can check, or maybe you cannot check.
Yeah, it's a bit iffy to me to do stuff like that.
All right, if you insist, I can keep it nice and tidy.
No, just leave it. It's just a thing that.
Yeah, I don't care that much about names that are not giving me any value. Honestly, I would prefer to put it on the same line. But anyway, since we are in your show, I'm going to be polite. The only thing I'm gonna do here is call this repository fragment ID. And I don't care about this index. Cool. So now the cool thing is that this stuff here can move into a separate class. And the only thing we know about this class is that it gives us an observable of repositories, as opposed to knowing that any network calls are happening or anything like that. Make sense?
Yeah, I don't think it's even there. It shouldn't be there.
Yeah. But let's cross that bridge later. Let's finish with this refactoring, and now I'm just going to wildly copy paste some code here, make it compile, and then move it to the right method. So we are making this request. We are, I think, doing this mapping. I think it goes through nodes. And then this time around, we're not binding anything. We're using this code here. And this is the identifier. Also, this is not a repository fragment. This is a pull request fragment. And here we no longer need to do this indexing. Of course, this is not called repositories at all. It's called pull requests. And finally, let me see that it compiles. It does, so let's comment this out. Let's comment those guys out as well, just to be able to tell which one I'm seeing. Now we're crashing.
Index out of range.
Yeah, that makes sense. That actually makes sense, because now I hate that I did not make a commit. So actually the problem was somewhere else. The problem is here. If you remember, we had this repositories array that
last time.
yeah, you used to have them, but I no longer need it. So I can delete it from here. And if I finish that refactoring and deleted it, I would have seen this problem. And the problem is that this prepare here that needs to make this navigation does not know where it needs to go.
Mm-hmm. And that's why it's indexed out of range.
That's why it's indexed out of range. Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure how to solve this now. What I don't like about this situation is that now I'm like both changing this and also like stop changing this midway. So I should have committed before I came here and did a whip commit. I missed that opportunity. Now, if I want to be really pedantic, I should backtrack, make a commit, maybe save this code somewhere just to have it, and then focus on this one. But I personally feel very confident that I would like get it from the first time. But if I was a bit less confident, I would do the proper structured step-by-step baby step way.
Yeah, so I think it's about confidence here. It's always like that.
Yeah, which way do you want me to go?
Let's go ahead. Let's see. But typically I do that in a time box. So if I feel in 5 minutes nothing's good, then I will go back.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, let's go ahead. You only live once. So my assumption is actually that here we have something that would help me to solve this problem. I'm sure there's some functionality here for that. My problem now is that here I don't get the actual object. I just get the index. And I need to convert from the index to the array.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, you know what? Let's just hack the fuck out of it. I'm going to explain this a bit later. Or rather, first let's reintroduce this array. And then let's add this mystery share here. And then let's make one more subscription. And this time, every time we get a new array, let's write it to self-repositories. Again, I need to add this to the dispose bag. And now we work.
But you have an error.
I have an error. No, that's the pull request name. It's the same warning, and the warning is in the in the other file, and we already know how to fix it. So now that I have patched this, let's go back to the actual problem. It's not the solution I like, but it's okay for now. This warning here is for the same reason. This is better in view will appear. And again, I need to go super here. We have an error somewhere. Now we work, but I still get a weird error here, which I don't like. Sorry, a weird warning. Let me just trace it carefully. So it's not on this screen. All right, fine. Yeah, I still don't believe it. I just think I did not compile after I moved this method. So let me just restart. So I think it's gonna go away. Nope. All right. Then I do not know. Then it's a mystery to me. I think I can remove this guy as well. Let me just rebuild out of superstition. No, I'm not sure why I get this. Yep, beats me. Should we trace it or should we give up and continue? What's your take?
Let's try for 5 minutes to trace it, and if not, it doesn't work, we can continue. It's just a warning, but still.
Yeah, fair enough. So let's comment this guy out. See if this changes something. You know what? Now I'm becoming even more skeptical. I'm not sure when I'm getting that warning. So I did not get the warning when I came to this screen, but I think I got it when I went back.
Yeah.
But if I have this code here, I think it worked differently. Now I get it immediately. So there's probably an iOS developer somewhere that's like far more, experienced with iOS than me, which is, like any amount of experience with iOS, that's watching this and saying, you idiot, you're missing something very obvious.
Isn't it about the bind?
Not sure.
Because I think you have binder. I don't know. It's just a hunch.
We do, but it should be fine on view will appear. I don't know. Somebody's submitting something somewhere a bit too late. Or a bit too early. And
yeah, I think it's too early.
I think it's too early. Let's wait for it for a while. Are you happy with that?
Yeah.
I just have like a bit too many hypotheses. And let me make sure I have it in my list. I did that intentionally. So yeah, let's just finish what we started. So here I did this share, and then like every time I get a result, I write it down here. So I can perform this indexing. There should be a way around that. By the way, the reason I do share here is because otherwise this would end up creating two separate codes. And the reason is unobservable does not start doing anything until you subscribe. So like if I remove those two, this would not make a network code. But conversely, if I subscribe twice, it would make two network codes.
Yeah.
Which is not what I want either. So that's what this share does for me here.
It shares the call.
Yeah, it allows me to do multiple subscriptions, and they'll get evaluated only once, as long as there's one active. So I think, let me not repeat this mistake, just like do a look commit. I think this one, I think essentially there's a way to create an Rx data source. Store it somewhere here, and then use it to index. Use it to find the element with a given index. And I've done only the very simple thing or the very hard thing, which is use like this one. And this one is a bit more involved because we need to like do some fancy coding. But there should be a way to figure it out. I really want to know what this returns. Like Xcode is a bit weird, so this is my hack for
what am I?
Yeah, finding not just what am I, but just like creating a variable and then inspecting the type. But now I cannot infer what this is. the signature bind.
Yeah, when you have dynamic typing, it gets very weird sometimes.
Yeah, I kind of understand it though, but still. Well, I guess if I kind of understand it, then I don't really understand it. Yeah, beats me. Let's just read the docs for a while. Actually, let's go even further. Let's go and look at the code for a while. There should be UI table view extensions somewhere. UI collection extensions. Let's just search. I don't know if you can see this font. Yeah, I'm really trying to avoid this approach. Yeah, fair enough. All right, you know, let's keep it as is for now. It's this guy here that annoys me. Because fundamentally I should not need to do that. But I kind of need to like dig into the code to figure out how to do it nicely. So let me just commit this. And let's again double check that we're not doing anything fancy. Or we don't have any leftover code. There we go. And this is cool. So essentially, here's what we did. We removed a bunch of code.
Yeah. That was nice.
Yeah, let's see. Yep, we removed 22 lines. Let's say 20 lines because, yeah, okay, this counts. We removed a few lines and kind of make it simpler apart from this monstrosity here. And essentially you have two separate concerns. This one for getting the array of things to show, and this one for figuring out how to convert them to cells. And normally, if you have something more complicated, you create a class here.
Yeah, because if you have a lot of cells and you want to display them in such a way.
Yeah. And this class, you can hold an object of that class, you can hold the reference to it here. You would need to anyway. And then you can find the array of repositories in that. But because I don't have it, I'm doing this thing here. And again, it really annoys me. Because it creates an extra subscription and then stores this guy here just for kicks. And this is the next thing I would want to fix before I look into this warning.
So for me, it was very a lot of iOS. I start seeing more intricacies around iOS. It's interesting how I think it feels to me that it's still a very fragile environment. I mean, compared to other dynamic languages I used, this one feels a lot more, I think, even comparing with Ruby, right? I think Ruby is a lot more stable from this point of view, like having errors there and you don't know where they come from and so on.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't know whether I would use the word fragile.
Mm-hmm.
But it does have its specifics. It's actually a very, very, very interesting juxtaposition of stuff, because there's a part of it that's incredibly fresh and incredibly exciting,
Mm-hmm.
And there's a part of it that's ancient and really weird.
Mm-hmm.
So let me give you some examples. Swift is a very cool language. It's really very functional, and you can essentially make a point that half of Haskell is hidden in it.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed by how well they've built a functional language that pretends to be an object-oriented language. So
well, it's very functional, yeah.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time writing it until I figured out that it's way more functional than object-oriented. But conversely, it does not have garbage collection, or rather it has reference counting.
Yeah, well, that's fine, because I think that's the reason. It's more functional. You need to take care of these things.
Yeah, but I mean, there are not that many modern languages that would make you be careful with loops.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have this problem in Java, you don't have it in Scala.
It felt a bit like C++ from this point of view. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, objects, take care, allocation, deallocation, so on.
It's reminiscent of that, yeah. And that's kind of the history of Objective-C. By the way, another very impressive thing here is that they have a very cool language, and it interoperates with Objective-C, which is this monstrosity from the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
But Xcode is a bit shitty.
Mm-hmm.
Their APIs are a bit shitty. And, they're not a huge enabler of open source. So,
of course.
So if they were building it, they would have much nicer errors. But with RX Swift, you occasionally struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as I mentioned, they are doing something called Combine, which is essentially RX Swift, slightly different, but the same. And they're also essentially removing this view controller nonsense and doing something called Swift UI, which is really reminiscent of React and is very cool and functional.
Mm-hmm.
It's still early days. It needs to interrupt with the old stuff, but I'm just very impressed to see a fresh new technology in the midst of this ancient old behemoth that is really scary. So it really took me a while to figure it out, but there's a very, very interesting and cool core in the middle of stuff that's a bit more dated.
I think it's also the environment feels a bit, that's why I use the word fragile, but maybe also it feels to me unstable or something you cannot count on. It's that kind of place where maybe you can hunt errors for a long time.
Yeah, definitely. And you do get used to it, but it's a bit weird.
Yeah.
And by the way, it might be I've messed up something here, and that's why we have half of the problems. But in my experience, it just has its weirdness. For example, if you do a build in the middle of another build, occasionally it just dies weird.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of figuring it out.
I think not a lot of IDEs like that, or editors or anything.
Yeah, you would never see that in IntelliJ or Android Studio.
Yeah, that's true.
But you get used to it. It's acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's again a very interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah,
I mean, I have this theory actually that all successful software you can and the really successful stuff that has been very, very big and very popular are always based on layers and layers and layers and layers of legacy shit.
Yeah.
So if you look at the modern JavaScript, it's really cool, but it sits on top of years and years of HTTP, JavaScript, HTML, and like Blink tag, Mark tag, and so on.
Yeah, that's true.
If you look at the like the modern processors, virtually every modern processor is a RISC processor that emulates a CISC processor from the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So every processor has a set of instructions that are not its real instructions, but something like really old, defined in x86,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like emulating it. And yeah, like every time you get something really successful, chances are it's gonna have this like big trace of really shitty legacy, and the really shitty legacy here is the Objective-C world and the actually desktop Mac world, because a lot of the iOS
it was
UI
desktop.
kit concepts were modeled after the desktop ones.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just like part of life, I think.
You can imagine that it's very difficult to start all over and scratch everything, and now say from now you're going to do this. It's extremely expensive, it's extremely costly, and maybe even not very functional to some extent. You need some years to have a new system working. So I guess there are good reasons for having this legacy crap, because hey, it works, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you know, like time to market. Like if Apple wanted to do the cool things they were doing now in 2008 instead, the iPhone would have been a few years late to the market.
Yeah.
You know, and it would have been like totally dominated by Android. But they did what they had, and it's out there.
Yeah.
And then they iterated. So yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
No, not really. How was it for you? Did you notice anything new?
I noticed that we were a bit more fast, I think, but also I would commit more often. I would have committed more often at times. You also saw that.
Yeah.
And anything else? I think it becomes more complicated. That's the thing. We start seeing more of the core of whatever is going on, and the insides of this environment.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's that's where the fun is.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so let's wrap it up. Thank you for this session, and until next time, have fun coding.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Bye bye.